I'm Richard LaFrancis, the director of the Pappy Boyington Veterans Museum. The mission of the Pappy Boyington Veterans Museum is to preserve the stories and artifacts of veterans. That way, the veterans who have sacrificed and died for our freedoms won't be forgotten. In the museum's Cold War exhibit, we begin with the delivery of the atomic bomb components to Tinian Island by the heavy cruiser Indianapolis in July of 1945. This event has special significance to the museum and its director, who is yours truly, Richard LaFrancis. After my father passed, I found this letter on his computer telling his story of the event. Here is how he described the events of that day. On June 28, 1945, I returned from the Pacific Islands with a load of cargo, landing at Hamilton Field near San Rafael, California. I had been flying my crew in C-54 between Hawaii, the Marianas, and Okinawa. Your mother took a bus from Red Bluff and met me in San Francisco, where the two of us celebrated a little. While in the city, a report came into the newspapers and the radio that the war was over. Everyone went crazy. However, it was short-lived, for another report came in that the whole episode was false. Quite a letdown. Shortly after that, my crew and I left Hamilton for the Pacific again with a load of passengers and cargo. After several shuttles back and forth between islands, we arrived at Nichols Field, Manila on the 27th of July. We loaded passengers and cargo and prepared to depart for Guam on 29 July. One of my passengers was an Army Brigadier General who was MacArthur's artillery officer. Immediately after takeoff in C-54E-046, I offered the pilot's bunk to him. Prior to takeoff, I had been briefed that the Navy would be scheduling target practice for the fleet someplace between the Philippines and the Marianas. We were to stay about 20 miles north of the target area. The takeoff had been at night, and we arrived at the target area at about 9,000 feet. We observed massive firing by naval ships quite south of us, but evidently targeting an object about 10 miles to the south of us. I called the general up to the cockpit, placed him in the co-pilot seat so he could view the naval artillery in action. He enjoyed the action and commented that the target seemed to be firing back. We all thought this was humorous, but it actually appeared to be that way. Our observation of the action was fleeting, and soon we had proceeded beyond the practice area. The next day at Harmon Field in Guam, I got a ride to the Navy Inn and reported to a Navy commander that we observed the action where the object of practice seemed to be firing, a ship being sunk, and that the general had believed it fired back. The commander told me that he had no knowledge of any practice in that area and that we probably didn't see any action as described. I let it go at that. 2 days later, it was announced on the island military radio that the Indianapolis had been sunk at about that area. We saw the practice bombardment. When I notified the Navy again of our observations, they disregarded the information. When I finally arrived at Hamilton Field sometime later, I informed our base intelligence officer of the incident, and he told me to forget it, that it was a Navy problem. I was not satisfied with the answer, so I called the FBI in San Francisco, and they sent an agent out to my barracks. My navigator plotted the exact location of the incident on the map, which I gave the agent. I've never heard anything about this since, except what I read in the newspapers. That's how he finished it. I do know that shortly after the FBI agent talked to him, he was transferred to Kwajalein Island. It's strange that after spending almost the entire war overseas, in every theater, that he would be sent to a very isolated location after his report. His name is in several books, and several authors even speculated as to what he did or thought, but he was never contacted by any of them, even though it was in the phone book. All of these authors used the name of Captain Richard G. LaFrancis. Where did they get it? Where is the report now that they used in their books? We would like to have any information about these questions and any information about the Indy for our exhibit at the museum. Now, we can only grieve for the loss of the brave Americans of the Indianapolis, their loved ones, and the children that they never had. There are many more items in this display not described here. Come on in and visit. We need the money.